I want to talk us through some common mistakes that we see in brand story videos that if you have these we'll go over these four common mistakes that come up in brand story videos. The first one is going to be you start with your credentials instead of what we might say connection. Credentials instead of connection. And what we mean by that is when you start to just talk about all the things that you've done, how awesome you are, how
Mm.
cool you are. I think we've all seen videos like that, right? Where we push play and it's just like, man, this guy just likes himself, you know? It's like, bro, just like, okay. And it I'm a fan of Don Miller and the story brand framework, and he talks about being the guide and not the hero, right? And usually that's this part here when you
Yep.
start talking about how cool you are and all those things. It's like it makes you the hero of the story. And we typically hear things like, well, back in 1992 my grandfather decided to start a company, and this is what, and it's just like it's all the things that potential clients don't really care about, right?
Mhm.
Potential clients are always coming to you, a website or a video of yours, to say, I have a problem. Can you help me solve it? And when you lead with credentials instead of some type of connection to make sure that you say to them, I understand who you are and what you're doing, that's a big mistake that we see, right? How does that sit with you, Dustin?
Yeah, I 100% agree. I think that's the reason you have the testimonials is it's the hero's journey of the guide. If I could get a little kind of cross pollinated there,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Like
yeah.
it's like the testimonial pieces are a way for you to share the impact without you having to be the one to be like, look at all the great stuff
Yeah,
I've done.
yeah.
Because it's really more like you said. We've talked about this before. I can't remember if we've talked about it on podcast or not, so forgive me if we haven't gotten there yet. But when we think about coaching with content, like even in that BSV, even in that brand story video,
Yeah.
there should be some coaching in it, right?
That's
Because
good.
for example, you're going to do one about me. I'm going to talk about how creatives live on little to no margin and how that's affecting their bottom line and their scalability.
Yeah.
And then I'm going to talk about time margin, and I'm going to introduce probably the whole do versus do thing because it's kind of like a cornerstone framework of mine.
Right.
And even in that, I'm adding value. I'm guiding. I'm not trying to be heroic by centering myself at it. I'm going, you can be the hero by implementing this framework.
Correct. Correct. That's the key, right? That's the key is in teaching kind of your perspective and who you are and why you do it. It's coming along and coaching with the content or being that guide to the hero of the story, which is your potential client. And so, yeah, when you lead with credentials or you lead with that, like who you are and how awesome you are, you can easily lose
Mm-hmm.
people. And so
Yep.
that's one of the biggest mistakes that we see. The second mistake that we see is what I'll say, sharing all the details of your story, oversharing. Like you're typically what we have is a little bit of a curse of knowledge, right? We've lived our experience, so we want to make sure that they understand the full thing instead of kind of giving those highlights, right? Those two or three things that are going to help in the story. But what we typically do is we go all the way back. I made the joke about, in 1992 this company was started, or back when this, and I got fired from my job, made me go out and start this company. Like, there are certain aspects of that story that are helpful, but often what we do is we want to make sure that they understand the full nuance. So we overshare.
Right. Right. Right.
And it just, again, it kind of becomes that much, if you're sharing too many credentials, it's the same idea. You're sharing too much of your story, people get lost in it, right? And they're like trying to track and follow and see what you're doing. And that can often lead to confusion. And when you lead to confusion, people are just going to kind of disengage in some way, shape, or form.
Yep.
And so that second mistake being oversharing the details of your story.
Mm-hmm.
Dustin, have you seen or heard or, experienced anything like that where you're just like, bro, calm it
Yeah.
down?
I actually have a practical tip here for you.
Nice.
I was just recording earlier today. I was recording another podcast that I do for another business that I co-own with a couple of partners called the Culture Base. And on that, we were talking about storytelling and how it carries through your values of your company, right?
Mhm.
And my business partner Blake was telling this story about how he was just recently in Chicago with this like conference group or whatever, and they sat down with the team at Second City. If you don't know what
Mhm.
Second City is, it's a famous improv group in Chicago. Steve Carell, Chris Farley, Tina Fey, like all these people have gone through Second City. And so Second City sat down with them and and led them through this storytelling exercise. And they said, "Hey, I want you to share a story. They partner people up. I want you to share a story. I want you to share a story with somebody or with the person, your partner, about a recent success or win in your life or your business or whatever. And I want you to say it. I want you to tell it to them in 60 seconds."
Mm.
And they were, telling them, "Hey, you're 15 seconds in, 30 seconds in, 15 seconds to go, 10, counting them down, right? Putting the pressure on." And Blake's like, "Man, I thought I was a decent storyteller, but 30 seconds in, I hadn't really even gotten to the story yet." So he's like rushing through it to get to the end. He's like, "Okay, now your partner is going to repeat that story back to you in 30 seconds."
Mm.
And then that was their challenge. And they went through it and they counted them down or whatever. It's like, okay, and you are going to repeat what you heard back from like what you just heard from your
Yeah,
partner. You're going to
yeah.
repeat that back to him in 10 seconds. And so the idea of the exercise
Wow.
was that it taught them how to be more concise and
Yep.
get to the point quicker in their story by cutting out all the fluff and just focusing on what matters. But I thought it was a great tip to be able to kind of refine your message and get to the point,
Yeah.
get to the meat of what, and kind of remove as much fluff as possible because you don't realize.
Yeah.
I mean, what I love, just one thing, what I love about this exercise in the first interaction from you to your partner, the 60-second version to them telling you the 30-second version back, you get immediate feedback on 30 seconds of that story that didn't matter.
For sure.
It's
For sure.
immediate.
Yeah.
And then you hear that and you go, "Oh, I can cut 20 out of that
Yeah.
and I'll give you 10 back."
Yeah.
And now you've gotten what took you 6 times as long to
Yep.
tell.
Yep.
6
Yep.
times. That's craziness.
Yeah, and what that says to me, Dustin, I was thinking of this, is that we often don't practice or think about how to share our story well.
Mhm.
We go, "Oh, I know my story," right? Like if somebody said,
Yeah.
"Hey, what tell me that story." You're like,
Yeah.
"Oh, okay, I'll just start doing it."
But it's
And
practice.
and we don't practice it. We don't think about what you just outlined, where it's like, what is all the crap that is not needed in there?
Right.
And I've even been doing that, like with voice memos that I send to you or other team members, right? Where it's like I just get long winded just talking about a bunch of stuff. I keep telling myself, get to the point, get to the point, get to the point, right? Like I'm trying to edit it. Now I'm going to start to do that with the 60-second thing all across
Yeah.
the board. But that just, it shines a big light on the fact that often we don't think about how to tell our story or even stories well.
Mhm.
And so that becomes a big mistake that we have in our brand story videos, is because we overshare our own story in some way, shape, or form. That's really good. So yeah, the first mistake that we commonly see is sharing too many credentials. The second one is sharing every detail of our story in some way, shape, or form. The third mistake is that we see forgetting to connect your story to your audience's challenges,
Mm.
right? And so when we don't take our story and kind of reverse that into, again, it takes us out of the hero seat and puts us in the guide seat, if you will, if we're going to take that story arc from the story brand framework. But what will happen often is we just begin to forget to go, how does our story connect with the challenge that the audience is facing at this point? And how does my story enhance that reality instead of take away or just talk about how awesome we are?
Yeah.
We see that done. If you ever watch a brand story and you're engaged and you're captivated and you go, wow, that was really cool, it's because whoever put that together sat and thought, how can I take this part of my story and engage it with my audience in some way, shape, or form? And
Yeah.
when that is done well, it really does hit really, really well.
Yeah, you always got to remember your clients struggle because you're trying to
Mhm.
come in and guide them through it so that they can be the
Yeah.
hero of their own struggle story,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
um, there's a speaker that I've gleaned a lot of wisdom from over the years, and he talks about, um, or in his messages or in his talks a lot, he will often say, "Hey, what do we all know?" And that's a way for, hey, what do we all know? We all know that video is great and that video is effective, right? So it's like that whole kind of like, let's get on the same page so that we're at the same starting point
Yeah.
and so that we can relate to one another. And if we can
Yeah.
all agree on A, B, and C, then we can get to X, Y, and Z together. Right.
Correct.
And
Correct.
that's what a good guide does. A good
Mhm.
guide says, hey, you ever notice how like videos are just popping off right now? Or you ever notice how like
Yeah.
reels are more effective sometimes than,
Yeah.
than just carousels. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? You ever know,
Yeah.
and then kind of get in that and they
Yep.
go, oh, you're right. And then now, okay, now you're on the same page and you can guide them through. And that's
Yep.
just good. That's just good coaching,
Yeah.
even more so with content.
Yeah, and I really like that idea of when you bring up the problem, you bring up the issue or something that your audience member will be facing, and then you tie that into the story of
Yeah.
your experience,
Yeah.
right? So here's the problem. Well, I experienced that when I did this, and
Hmm.
this is how I overcame it. Now all of a sudden your story brings them along and into that because you started with the problem, which we'll probably talk about in the framework breakdown here in just a little bit.
Hmm.
But man, that's really really good, really really good. So the fourth common mistake that we see is ending without a clear so what for the listener. Like so what? Like you got to say what does this mean to them, and then like almost call them into action, right? So if we're going with that little piece that we talk about there, where you present the problem, you tell the story. So what does that mean for them now? Well, that means that they need to either take this action, right? They need to create their own video, or they need to take this framework and put it into place. Like, what does it mean for them, and to move them into action in some way, shape, or form, right? Because we've all been there where we've experienced maybe a brand story video or something out there, and we go, man, that was really cool. What now? Like there's no real like inspiration to move to action. I would even say the call to action is the so what's next, right? Like
Right.
what is that call to action? So kind of leaving them flat with like just telling your story and saying thanks for listening, it's just like no, you have to have a moment of calling them to action. I even think in the hero's journey, right, that you have a hero that meets a guide that has this problem that they're facing, that the guide walks them through, that then he calls them into action, right? Like any good movie that we have and we see the guide hero movement, right? The guide will always call them to action. You have to step into that thing that you're scared of. You have to move forward. And in those brand story videos, you have to move them into some type of action or call them into action in some way, shape, or form. And so those are really the four common mistakes that we see in brand story videos.